Dave, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, great. Channel 17, if you want to go ahead and start the recording. Enjoy, you can start. Okay, thanks.
Welcome to TMAC today, everyone. Thanks for all who are here. Thank you for coming. Our TMAC Chair, Clancy Black, could not be here today, so I will be conducting. I'm Joy McMurray, TMAC Vice Chair, and I will begin by reading our hybrid meeting protocol. Due to the ongoing coronavirus pandemic and Utah County's high level of coronavirus transmission, the Provo City Transportation and Mobility Advisory Committee has determined to hold hybrid meetings with an anchor location and online. So here's our anchor location. Online is going well. If you're interested in participating, you can watch the live broadcast at Provo Channel 17, or you can attend here at the Provo City's Public Works Building, Conference Room 4. Let's go ahead and introduce who's here today. Dave Arnold is attending via Zoom, and then let's go ahead and go around and introduce ourselves. Again, I'm Joy McMurray.
I'm Lisa Jensen, County Commission Rep.
Taylor Knight.
And Huntsman.
John Short, Public Works Engineer.
Rob Hunter, Provo Engineering.
Gordon Haight, Provo Engineering.
Just Gandy, Public Works.
Lee Johnson, Public Works Engineering.
Bill Fillmore, representing City Council.
Thank you. I would like to just note, at the moment, we only have 3 of our, we're getting Greg, great. And Greg will make a quorum, so we could have a vote if we need to have a vote, although I don't think there's any voting items today. Now,
just approving the minutes, yeah.
Oh, just approving the minutes. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, Greg. Glad you're with us. Okay, so the first action item today is to approve our minutes from our April meeting. I motion that we approve the minutes. By Lisa. Any other comments? Good, okay. Then let's move right on to item 3, Timpview Drive Demonstration Project by Rob. Presented by Rob.
All right, so we had a meeting last night with the neighborhood. This is something that Clancy had asked that we kind of give you all an update on. So if you recall, we had Brian Henry came 2 or 3 months ago, I can't remember now, and presented 2 months ago on wanting to do a demonstration project on Timpview Drive before we repave the road. We're repaving as part of our road rehab project, going from the signal at 2200 north up to 2950 north. Anyway, so we've done these demonstration projects on Slate Canyon Drive, and we had done one on 1450 East. Brian said, "Hey, what do you think about doing one on Timpview Drive before you repave?" We thought it was a good idea. Presented it to TMAC. Got feedback on some of the ideas that we had done, and here just kind of giving a presentation on what we had implemented and the feedback that we've received in regards to it. So, kind of starting just from the north end, we tested a roundabout on 2780 north. Now this roundabout is smaller than our standard plans show, and really what we were trying to test here, what the intent of as we kind of went back and forth on what to test where, the intent of doing it here and doing it at this size is we obviously have a lot of our kind of standard size roundabouts throughout Provo, and we've tested on Slate Canyon and 1450 East, much smaller, what we call traffic circles. A lot of other municipalities call them mini roundabouts. There is one currently in the city at 200 East and 200 North. But what we were trying to attempt here is to see, is there something in the middle? A new roundabout, on average, has cost us in terms of doing it in a new intersection, replacing an existing intersection with the roundabout, has cost us in the realm of about $1 million. And a lot of that is because not only are you replacing a substantial amount on each corner, putting things in the middle, because of how substantial everything is, drainage needs to be redone a lot of times. Sometimes we've got to purchase more property on the corners. Anyways, on average, it's about $1 million. And so what we were attempting to test out here on an intersection that was bigger than the traffic circles that we've tested previously, the much smaller traffic circles, but smaller than our standard roundabout size is, there's a lot of different ways that you can do a roundabout. And so anyway, this is a kind of medium sized roundabout that we were testing out to see how it all worked. So that's the one off of 2780 North and Timpview Drive. And kind of as we go through, I'll give you the kind of the general feedback on each, and then we can see what the actual survey results were.
How, have you an estimate for how much it would cost compared?
I haven't fully costed it. The difficulty specifically right now in costing this one out is prices are growing crazy. Yeah. So, I mean,
even if you could get a price, you couldn't get the concrete, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to do it right now. And part of the thing is that since this is a test, it was not a let's design it. Let's do a really hard design of exactly what we want to put in with no input. There was some design, some testing or CAD stuff that was put into it, but then it's put it out there and let's see. Make sure, since it is smaller than what we've done before, make sure things get around. So what we found on here, so the biggest feedback that we received in regards to this, I think the most substantial amount of feedback is that people feel it's too small. It's too small of a roundabout. And not that there was no positive, there were, I'd say about a third positive, generally positive, 2/3 generally negative. In regards to the roundabout, I will say that's consistent with what we found on the smaller traffic circles. Also, when we did the latest test last year on 1450 East was in that realm of 1/3 liked them, 2/3 did not. We had a little bit better average, but still slightly, the net slightly against when we did it on Slate Canyon Drive. We're taking that feedback and seeing again. This is a roundabout is a widely used across the world, and especially continuing to be across the United States. We're trying to figure out, is there a way that we can do it that doesn't cost $1 million each?
The thing that was kind of interesting, we had a fellow that had just come from Ireland. He'd been in the U.S. for a number of years, but he talked about how many roundabouts there were in Ireland and how few there are here and how difficult it was to transition to four-way or stop signs. And so I think that feedback was interesting, that people get up to roundabouts, but they're seldomly part of their driving experience. So it's more widely used. I think it's always going to be a little bit challenging to. I think that's what
people don't know how to use them.
Yeah, that seemed to be the comment.
I did feel like this size, if it sounds like people still thought it was too small, but it had a much better slowing effect than the one on 200. That one is almost like a decorative garden in the middle of the street. There's absolutely no slowing effect.
Well, and we'll get to. We did do speed tests through here, which confirms that it did slow people down. So, one of the concerns. So we did have our fire department drive through the smaller traffic circles. We didn't have them test out. That was one of the feedback, is that the feeling was we should have our fire department test out every one before we put them in and get their feedback. So that's fair. We can do that. The overall thought that I think some people don't, which again, so maybe the overall takeaway that I just need to say up front, the overall takeaway is that, so this was brought to us, as we talked about, this was brought to us by somebody in the neighborhood. We had more people who volunteered to help out and did do some of the help that were in the neighborhood. Not everybody was in the neighborhood. We coordinated with Bike Walk to help do because of how big of a project and how fast we needed it done, so that we could get it in before we repaved this road. A lot of it was done through volunteer work, but it was some neighborhood. But where I failed as the one managing the project is I needed to have done neighborhood meetings, letting people know this is coming. We put it out there. We put up signs with QR codes so that people could give their feedback. But without having that outreach beforehand, there was a strong negative reaction of why is this going up, and nobody knew about it. And it's not that nobody, but understandably, they're saying, yeah, maybe not nobody, but very few, which is fair. With that, one of the things that maybe would have helped out, although we did more meetings off of Slate Canyon, we did more meetings up off of 1450 East, and this is very similar to a lot of the complaints that people had, is that you can't make it through without going up over this curb. When a roundabout is fully, and it would be the same thing here, there would be curbing. Even our full-size roundabouts have curbing, where most vehicles are going to be able to make it through. Larger vehicles do have to go over the top of the curbing. Even on full-size roundabouts, we would expect that exact same thing here. We set it to the size of, this is kind of the single occupancy vehicle where your travel path, but there would be mountable curbing to where if you have a larger vehicle or an extra long trailer or something like that, you can go over the top. So again, maybe just should have done better outreach up front to let people know this is what the intent is, this is how it would work, and maybe some of those complaints or misunderstandings would have been answered before we got out there.
So Rob, other than the concerns about it's too small and we didn't have enough notice, were there any other functional concerns? I spent a lot of time on Timpview Drive this week. I thought it was great. I thought it did a great job both keeping the flow going on that very important road, but also slowing the speed down for the children and the bikers and the pedestrians that are also frequently on that road. I really liked it, so I'm just interested, what do people not like? It was great.
It's a pretty long list. I don't know.
Maybe not go through all of it, but they had many concerns, essentially.
They had many.
Okay,
yeah.
that surprises me.
Let me keep it there just a minute. I was at the meeting.
Okay.
And I will say that when the first day the cones went up, my phone blew up. Okay? And that's my district.
Yeah.
Right, and it was 99% negative.
So I think we have to be careful sometimes to not beat ourselves over the head, because most people wouldn't look at the flyers if you had sent them out. They wouldn't have come to the public meetings ahead of time. And the people who have really strong opinions, especially really strong negative opinions, are going to be the only ones who talk, right? This isn't a scientific study of, okay, what percent of people like it, what percent of people don't. Most people are probably going to be apathetic or positive, but the negative ones will be the ones who reach out. I just encourage us to.
I don't know if he can hear you.
Greg, can you hear me? This is Bill Fillmore.
Yeah,
I can hear Greg just fine, so it's the room connection.
Say, Greg, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, that's why I'm guessing neither of you were at the meeting last night. I'm not suggesting that my percentages were scientific. I'm just indicating that was the initial reaction. And with time, I think we started to get some letters, some very long, thoughtful letters in favor of many of the elements. But at the meeting last night, it was extremely well attended, if you're just going by numbers. In fact, the deputy mayor joked with me that, golly, maybe we ought to screw up more often to get this much citizen participation. It was well attended, and almost uniformly the comments were civil and thoughtful. It wasn't like pitchforks and torches. But there were a lot of concerns. I thought some very valid issues were raised, and I thought it was a valuable meeting, not just for the citizens, but for Public Works to hear the citizens. I think, as Rob has indicated, some preparatory work in terms of neighborhood information that would have helped, but I don't think that would have eliminated the substantive concerns. So there are some issues. I mean, a lot of people said, what's wrong with four-way stops? You know, and they talked in terms of safety for the children. You know, the children have their crosswalks that are marked, and there's greater visibility than there would be with a roundabout, particularly if you involve foliage in the roundabout. Cars can see the kids better. I mean, there were a lot of, I mean, most of the, I'll call them the motherly concerns was for the safety of the kids. They were a little bit concerned also about the crosswalks, but the inner bike lanes. That as well was an issue, and I think education helps with a lot of that, but I wouldn't be overly dismissive of their concerns simply because we didn't have neighborhood meetings.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be entirely dismissive. I think you raised some good points there. It's always tricky dealing with things like this because, you know, sometimes we see this a lot, that the people who speak loudest are not necessarily in the majority. But thanks for clarifying that, Bill.
Somebody have any other, so.
I do want to, when you say the roundabout was too small, what do you mean? The intersection was too small for roundabout, or the pseudo roundabout should have been larger?
Well, so, depends, I think, on who you ask, but in terms of comparing this to our standard roundabout, the total lane width in terms of from curb to curb was about the same as what we have on a from the inner, you know, circle to the curb is about the same as what we have on the standard roundabout. But there's a lot bigger diameter on our standard roundabout. So it's a lot larger intersection overall, even if the travel lane is about the same width. And so it makes it a sharper turn. And there's not as much distance between as I enter the roundabout and where I exit the roundabout, and I think some of the concerns of, you know, that makes the crossings too close to where they start the roundabout. Which again, so this isn't our standard size, and we can go. We were just trying to try out, and it's not being dismissive, you know, but I think it was important for us to at least try and see what the feedback is, because again, a roundabout is a widely used and proven over and over and over again, very safe intersection, safe for pedestrians, safe for vehicles. You know, it's more efficient. There's really not a negative to a roundabout, but our standard size roundabout, trying to fit that into an existing intersection, is about $1 million. So we're trying to say, is there a cheaper way? The only way that we could do it cheaper is if we can do a smaller one. If the answer is we can't do a smaller one, then the answer is it's $1 million to do it.
How comparable in sizes was this to the 200 north, 200 east traffic circle?
I will have to, well, I guess I could pull it up. I think the 200 north, 200 east traffic circle is 20-foot diameter, and we did, this was not quite 40 foot. I think it's 38 foot. I could, out of the way. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. I think our diameter circle for our standard roundabout is not quite twice that. So I mean, so this is 74, something like that. From the the diameter of the circle. So if I go to 200 north, 200 east. And again, our standard is not the only, that's not saying that's the only option. It's just here's what, as we plan for the future, this is what we want our intersections to look like, but we have a lot of existing intersections where roundabouts could work. Like I said, that if we're going to say, which may still be the answer, but if we're going to say we're only going to use our standard size roundabout, that makes it very expensive.
One thing to that, Rob. And on the standard, let's say that's not the standard exact fixed size. It can be changed. The variants are allowed depending on the size of the intersection. On this intersection that we have our temporary one, we try to make it as close as possible to our standard. But based on the area that we have, this is what we knew that it is not exactly our standard. It's small. We knew all of those, but we tried to still make it as close as possible to the standard.
So did you say Did you say the full-size ones, like the one on 920 South and Freedom? Is that one more like 70? Is that what you said?
That's the one that I'm trying to get to. Dave and somehow the mouse went crazy on me, so we're getting back to it.
Because as a neighborhood, we would never want a stop sign put in there. That one is very functional.
Very, very functional, and I'll say very functional for the very, very high end of what, or near the
62
very, very
feet.
high end of what it shows. A single lane roundabout can do, and
Yeah.
I go through here every single day, and I've never had an issue.
It is so
That one's 62.
efficient. Yeah. 62.
That one's even smaller. Like I said, I think our standard is 74, but even this one, again, our standard is here's in general what we're looking for. If you're building a brand new intersection in an undeveloped area, here's how much we want you to set aside for us to do this type of intersection. But we regularly, it's a case by case basis in terms of what size we actually have. This one's 62, and this carries, if my recollection is correct, between Freedom and 920 South, this intersection, in terms of people entering, the total traffic per day is somewhere in the 16 or 18,000, and it functions great.
And when this one went in, I remember there was a lot of public outcry. So, Bill, this is just, I don't disagree with anything you said, but this particular roundabout had a lot of public outcry. And today, I don't think there's anybody that wouldn't want this. So I think we take feedback, but and maybe this is the wrong application for it, but yeah, sometimes change is hard no matter what the change is. I had a question about that. Does that particular intersection where you put it in on Timpview Drive, would that meet the warrant for stop signs? What's the volume?
For a four-way stop, it would not.
Oh, so that might be another reason we're getting negative feedback, right? So we're primarily we'd want to put this in here for getting the speed reduced for safety on the crosswalks. It
was overall as a traffic calming feature. It was not because the volume warrants are met to where we either need a four-way stop or a roundabout.
Are you planning on putting it in here ultimately, or would you put it where the four-way stop is?
Well,
one of the four-way stops, there's two of them.
there's no plan to put anywhere on the street. So right now, we're just trying out, and so right now, there's zero plans to do
But
any.
if you had a plan, it would be where the volume is such that it would be a better place to put it, right? Not where you've practiced it.
So eventually, there's a couple places we could do it, but where we have typically done it, so this volume currently would not meet. Sorry, this mouse is super sensitive, and I have problems with it every single time. I should really learn how to use this mouse before I keep doing it with every meeting.
Practice it.
Yeah, but I'll turn on our street plan. So yeah, this is not rising to the level of we're saying, hey, this needs to go in immediately. Again, this was brought to us some concerns, and we said, hey, let's test it out and see what people think. So there's no immediate plan, but where we tested it is right here at 2780 and you drive. That's a collector-to-collector connection, and that's typically where we put our roundabouts, is a collector-to-collector connection.
Okay.
The reason it's kind of considered at a place where you don't have a four-way stop warrant is because that's a two-way stop, people go very quickly through there. They don't have to really have somebody at the crosswalk. They're supposed to stop to let them through, and it's kind of difficult. Since we're not going to put a four-way stop there, what really is the option? So certainly this was not received well by the neighborhood, but we need to think about what we can do. And there was discussions of some other options, and we'll certainly.
I would just add that I just wanted to add that there's a lot of research that I think underlines the point that stop signs are not good traffic calming techniques. People ignore them, or when they do stop for them, they then accelerate coming out of the stop sign. So stop signs should be used when you need to control the flow of traffic and assign right of way. They should not be used for traffic calming.
And to put a fine point on that, Greg, the manual on uniform traffic control devices, both the national one and the state one, clearly states that stop signs should not be used as speed control.
Yeah.
There's no, they don't leave it up to, it's a don't do that. So.
Let's let you finish with your presentation. Thank you for letting us dive into that one.
No worries.
That one caused the most discussion, so it's probably good for you to talk.
Yeah, the roundabout.
I couldn't imagine how you were going to do it temporarily. That's pretty cool. So, I mean, as far as the way you did it, right? I in my mind, when you were describing it, I'm trying to figure out how on earth you're going to put a temporary traffic circle up, but you guys did it, so.
Thank you.
Potted plants and everything.
It did have, so what we wish you still saw here was some potted plants. You see the pot, but the plants along the entire stretch were all run over, seemingly on purpose. I think maybe if one or two were taken out, then it could have been, somebody wasn't paying attention. But yeah, every single, I think there was one that Kahan was able to salvage that it was run over, but he was able to stand back up. The rest were run over, broken, unsalvageable. So it's unfortunate. The next, one of the other things that we tried, and maybe, I don't know, the presentation, I guess, now is going longer, and there's lots of questions. I don't know if you guys want me to continue with the presentation or if we want to kind of quickly wrap this up, but maybe I'll just try to quickly go through, and then you can
I think this is our main agenda item, Rob.
Yeah.
I think we're doing fine.
Okay. So I show what we did, I guess what, working with the volunteers, what they put out there, and what we were trying to mimic. So this is a street in outside of St. George that I have heard. I think Brian brought this up in the meeting, and I have seen many presentations with many city transportation staff bring this up as an example of this worked out well. And really, this is what we were trying to mimic is planter spaces, still leaving a fairly substantial amount of parking, but some planter spaces. So you see here, this one was done with the parking outside of the bike lane. So we tested out, and it's been requested. I mean, I've only been the transportation engineer for 2 years, and I can't tell you how many times we've been asked by different groups, and mainly Bike Walk Provo, to try out parking protected bike lanes. And again, this is where we said we're not going to do it in front of anybody's house. We're going to do it on the portions of the street. It's not directly in front of anybody's house because nobody's going to like it in front of their house. But let's try it on the portions that aren't, and we can test it out and see what people think. And so this one in particular, we did it a few different ways. One just does have planter strips, where the parking is back behind the curb. This one, where I have it pictured, it switches where the bike lane is back behind here. But basically, this is what we're trying to do: adding additional vegetation to the street has been shown, and I mean with these chicanes, bulb outs, whatever you want to call them, has been shown to calm traffic.
Absolutely.
And to give a different feel overall to the street, a much calmer feel that people don't feel like this is a, basically highway for me to drive down. This is a neighborhood. This is nice. I want to slow down and really take it all in. So that's what we're attempting to portray there.
So that's largely a psychological effect. It's not structural in terms of traffic so much.
Yeah, so it is psychological, but it tightens down. It's the same thing as so you can make lanes tighter. That tends to slow people down. You can put things out closer to the lane. That'll tend to slow people down. So it's not they can't drive 35 miles an hour. It's just that they don't feel as good doing it. So they'll slow down.
I really liked the design of it as well, and you made it a clear transition between when the bike lane moved to back by the road. I thought it was very clear.
Yeah. So we used some of this was done. Our streets crews came in and kind of did the main lines for us, and then volunteers came in and painted it and tried to decorate it up and make it look, without having enough money to put a temporary planter strip along this entire road, at least with paint, trying to say, hey, something could go here, something could go here.
Did the traffic slow down? Did you do before and after speed tests?
So we have the one that I have right now. So kind of with the way that this went down and how it's gone. As we said at the beginning, didn't do enough outreach. That was my fault. And so we're actually coming up on where pretty close to where it's going to be repaved anyways. And so we've taken everything down or are in the process actually today of taking everything down. But the counters, you'll actually see one back here. We took down yesterday afternoon, and so I don't have all the data. You know, like I said, Clancy, which I think was the right thing, wanted to have us come in and do a presentation, but I didn't have enough time with preparing for that meeting, preparing for this meeting to download the data and get it all for you. So yes, we do have it. I just don't have it today.
Okay. Thanks.
And we do have pre-project speed, so I can I do have some of that data for comparison.
Okay.
And then here's one where it was without a planner, just straightforward parking protected bike lanes, no barriers in between, but just here's where you park. Here's where the bike lanes are, and the bike lanes are further in. Some of the complaints there, which I think are valid. So the one where I will say that I've seen this used the most often is in downtown areas where there is not a lot of driveways. We decided to at least try it out here in a more residential area, but again, where there's not a lot of driveways, that just parking protected bike lane. But the concern is that you make bicyclists, and there's a lot of people who walk here and use their strollers, and everybody uses the bike lane. Or if there's nobody in the parking lane, they do want to be further off from the street. So this is, hey, we'll make sure that all the pedestrians and cyclists and strollers and everything have a place that's purposely further away. But on the occasion that somebody parks here, they'll be closer to the travel lane. And the concern is that if you're closer to the travel lane parking, then what if my kid opens the door? Which I mean, that's a valid concern. What if my kid opens the door and gets out, without paying too much attention? And right now I've got a bike lane that can buffer, their risk. But if you put me out closer to the travel lane, then there's nothing buffering the risk of my kid jumping out of the car, which is a valid concern. These are used in a lot of places with success, but that doesn't mean that the current concern, that overall concern isn't valid.
The concern last night was that if you have the bike lane on the inside and the parking in the middle, you've doubled your risk of doors opening and causing accidents, right, on the sides.
You can, yeah.
Whether it's kids or adults or whatever, it's got to be a hazard for bikers. All right.
It can be. So as a biker, you have the hazard if you're actually traveling in the lane. You have the hazard one way or the other, because
actually less of a hazard for the biker because it's pedestrian side or the passenger side instead of the driver's side.
So again, there are some pluses, and again, but you typically need to make these, and this is so in the residential areas, kind of the standard minimum parking width is 7 feet, and I can't remember if we got 8 or 9 here, but we added what we could here to test it out. Like I said, there is a risk one way or the other, but this has been used with success in places. So
the feedback was, let me understand, the feedback was that the drivers thought they had twice as much chance of their kids getting hit. Is that because they're opening 2 doors now where there's cars on one side and bicycles on the other, or was this feedback that the bikers didn't like it? The bikers thought this was less safe. Was this mostly for kids getting out of cars?
The bigger feedback, well, I guess in regards to this, we had both. We had some cyclists who responded back here and said, "Hey, just standard bike lanes is fine with me. I don't feel like we need anything more on the street."
Okay.
We've also had we brought something the option of striping 1730 north to that neighborhood almost 2 years ago, and it was surprising to me that some of the cyclists said, "No, I like with all the many complaints that we had of how unsafe 1730 is, that we did have cyclists in that meeting say, we don't need to stripe anything. I don't need a designated place. I like being able to go anywhere on the street." So there's not, one consensus that 100% of cyclists like only one thing.
All right, thanks.
That's why it's important for us to do these things where we're getting feedback. Like I said, we just need to do, I needed to have done better outreach up front. And then this one is, in the end, we called it some places call it Dutch style intersection. Unfortunately, if you call anything by a European name, that can sometimes have politics associated with it. And this wasn't even still, this isn't really a true Dutch style intersection because of the bulb outs that are already there. We couldn't do it exactly like what typically is referred to as a Dutch style intersection. What it is, but what the intent of testing this thing out is that our standard has been in Provo that we do bulb outs onto local roads. We don't do bulb outs onto collector streets. This was to say, hey, although in this location we do have bulb outs where the stop signs are, and so the question was, this seems like in a highly used school crossing, does it make sense to say we will not do bulb outs will not go on collector roads, or is this a good place to test and say, hey, is this a place where it can make sense? This one, again, the overall feedback was not positive. As we talked with the school and got feedback from them the very first day after we put it in, the other thing too, specific to here, is they were okay with some bulb outs in some locations, but bulb outs in other locations made it too difficult for them to turn into. If this would have been a 3-lane street, I think we would have been fine, but having it be a 2-lane street, they couldn't make the turn without encroaching too much into the other lane as the turn was made. So the first day we actually took a portion of it out, left a portion of it up, saying, hey, some of these things though, that doesn't have that same issue, do you like this? And basically the answer was 2/3 to 1, or 2/3 to 1/3. No, we don't like it.
I would say to ameliorate that a little bit, clearly the sentiment was anti-bulb out last night.
Yeah.
But there was a sentiment for doing something to make the crosswalks for the kids more obvious, more colorful, more whatever, to just remind every driver that these crosswalks are for a reason, particularly near the schools. Whatever you can do to enhance the crosswalks would be a good thing.
So we've talked about that too, and I think we brought it up here in TMAC, that if we do any artwork, in fact, one of the questions is specific, do you like artwork in the street? And even that one was 2/3 to 1/3 no, but which surprised me. But part of the thing with artwork in the street that we've, if we did move forward on a larger basis that we need to work through, is the kind of the technicalities of what artwork can and can't be used. So for this particular one, the main piece of art was they just used the symbols of the adjacent schools and the name of the overall neighborhood. Everything else couldn't be a symbol, couldn't be a word. It was just flowery type stuff. Until we can come up with again, with feedback, if we do want to do a larger street art, have that be an okay thing. Come up with how do we make it to where not everybody can put just whatever they want in the street, because then it'll become political, and there's just there's no way that's a positive thing moving forward. So anyways, we tested it out here. We've been asked multiple times about different types of street art, both in the street, on our our signal equipment and power on their power boxes and stuff. And so again, this was a way to say, really, how does everybody feel about it? And at least up in this neighborhood, the feeling was we don't want it. And then just on the south end, we just did standard. When this was done previously, the bike lanes weren't extended all the way down to 2200. So these are just standard bike lanes that we do plan to extend down to 2200. Just our standard stuff like the rest of the street has.
Was there any comments on that?
No, not on this stretch. Well, I should say, so as you'll see right here, as of yesterday, almost 650 responses. I can't say we've gone through all of the individual comments and really taken note. So as far as what I have seen so far in the stuff that we have read and any of the feedback, I have not seen that anybody has a problem with just the standard bike lanes. So we asked a few questions we put up signs, we had QR codes for feedback and everything, and this is kind of the breakdown. For some reason, the Google was breaking down, I think, a little bit further. Some of these are a little off, so it shows up for whatever reason a little bit twice. But in general, between the two main neighborhoods where this was at, which is Edgemont and Rock Canyon, they comprise over 50%. If you take into account Pleasant View and Indian Hills, which are all also within that same area, almost 3/4 of the feedback was from the neighborhood itself. And then as we go through, as you'll see, 1 was, as you'll see there, is low favorability, 5 is high favorability, and it was about a 2-to-1 dislike to like on about all these. So the roundabout, 2-to-1 against. The landscape buffered bike lanes, roughly 2-to-1 against. The parking buffered bike lanes, roughly 2-to-1 against. The
sorry to interrupt you. Sorry to interrupt. What strikes me most about these is the polarization.
Yeah, they're all polarized. I agree.
There's no one who's like, maybe it's an okay thing. Everyone hates it or loves it.
Yeah.
And I think I understand I'm not trying to make arguments necessarily against the purpose of public meetings, but I think we have to decide what's right technically using research. And we should help explain to the public what we're doing. But I'm a little bit nervous about just using a poll in what's obviously a pretty polarized situation to make infrastructure decisions. That's my expertise, but I know I'm not accountable to the to voters or anything like that. So.
Well, and I think it's important, at least for us to ask the question. The majority being either 1s or 5s have been what we found on every on the 3 different ones that we did this. The previous 2, again, doing substantially more groundwork up front with neighborhood meetings, but it was still the majority were either 1s or 5s.
How much time do you spend explaining what each of these items is before they take this survey?
If I may, so the very first page of this survey had our project, explaining the project. Basically, I believe it's a paragraph that kind of goes over what exactly is the project, what were we trying to accomplish, each and every single.
I'm kind of with Greg's concerns, where if you haven't sat in a meeting where someone explained to you why a parking buffered bike lane would be useful, or what the purpose of it is, you would look at that and say it's madness. Like, why would you do that? It's out of order. It's not what I'm used to. Even a roundabout, if you don't have roundabouts in your neighborhood, you say, what is this for? Why can't we just have a stop sign? And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it is just first exposure.
And yeah, and I agree with you. Also, to add on to that, so on top of that, first page kind of project, we have about 8 signs that are posted along the city drive. For the intersection of bodies, and then
once again, how many people actually took the time to read those, or how many people were just livid as they drove through and it wasn't the same as they were used to?
We need to have the meeting face to face.
Right. I just wonder if it would change with understanding. If the survey happened again after somebody understood it, or, in a different group, put it in a neighborhood where there's lots of roundabouts and see how they feel about roundabouts. It would be an interesting thing. I'm not saying that these aren't real concerns. I'm just saying I wonder if it's because it's first exposure and they don't understand the purpose. Even though there's words explaining the purpose, if they don't understand the purpose of what those ideas were.
Well, and I think one of the things that we took away from here, and so this is the third time we've done it, but having done it now 3 times with different neighborhoods. And on different types of, they've all been collector roads, but one was about, 3,000 to 3,500 cars a day. One was about 1,500 cars a day is all. It's hardly a collector road. And then this one, which is closer to 6,000 cars a day. And actually the one, the Slate Canyon, the first time we did it, was there, we actually had significantly less input than on 1450 East, which has less than half the volume. So it really depends on which neighborhood and all this kind of stuff. But here's one of the things that I'd say now, having done this the third time, is that I don't think that I would do this again unless there is a known pot of money that we're going to be able to do something with. The question is just, we want some feedback on the what. That was one of the biggest pieces of, things of angst was, why try this out if you don't know where the money's coming from, which was the case on Slate Canyon. We didn't have money set aside. Now on 1450 East, we did have some money set aside, and actually the result was, based off of the feedback, we didn't put any hard stuff in. We put a flashing speed sign and we're extending the bike lanes, but we're not putting a hard thing in because it was 2-to-1 against. We don't want it here. So I don't know that there's not a magic bullet to any of this, but I think it makes a lot more sense to say, hey, we have a known pot of money, but there is still some feedback that we can receive. There is still some room for public input, and that's where I would do it again.
I think another. Sorry, go ahead.
David, I was just going to add from a purely political standpoint that put your finger on some key issues. One is, if you don't have the money lined up, you're just risking shooting yourself in the foot gratuitously. A waste of time and money and public aggravation, right? But more importantly, Lisa and Greg both made a good point, which is the level of public education makes a huge difference on how people perceive things. And so admittedly, a lot of the people at the meeting last night, a lot of people who sent emails, and Gordon deserves huge kudos, by the way. Gordon replied to probably a couple hundred letters with a very polite response, and that was well received. Thanks for taking the time. But public education makes a huge difference. A lot of people respond very superficially. See that all the time, whether we're voting on a bond and somebody just purely anti-tax, and so they don't look at the issues. I mean, I'll give you two examples. One is Timpview High School. The bond a few years ago would have solved the problem at Timpview High School for $50 million less than what it's now costing. People just reacted in an anti-tax mood. The fact is, the state was about to condemn the high school, and had no choice, had to do something. And so now they've just kind of bootstrapped it. But because of the passage of time and the increase in construction costs, it's hugely more expensive. Another example is our new city hall and public safety, which is going to be an extraordinary asset to the city. They did a poll the summer before the vote on that, and it was 2-to-1 against. It was kind of a knee-jerk financial reaction, okay? In September, Mayor Kafusi asked me if I would chair a citizens board to champion the bond, and I agreed to do that. But every citizen had taken the tour I took of the police department before. I mean, it would have passed 9-to-1. I mean, we had people in closets with a little desk. We had black mold in the evidence room. We had all kinds of problems, and the fire station out in North Provo was a disaster. But if people are just reacting on a superficial level, you're always going to get a skewed vote. But it was 2-to-1 against it. And when we started, we mounted a public education process in September and October leading up to the vote. The poll showed it was 2-to-1 in favor. A lot of people had already made up their minds before that started, and so it only passed by 432 votes. We're all going to be very grateful for that new city hall. And we have a public safety facility now, better than any place in the state. Terrific. But same thing with this road, which is just a microcosm of the same issue.
Yeah.
With 200 East, 200 North, has there been outreach after it's been put in place and seeing if the perception of that has changed now that it's been there for a while?
I haven't done any specific outreach, no. I have received emails of people that don't like it, but I have not done, and I shouldn't be and I'm not being dismissive about that. But it would be interesting to see, now that it's been there for a while, what are people's long-term feelings.
To learn from experience, what don't they like about it?
I think one thing about the survey methods that we're doing is, let's see, how do I say this? we're getting people's response to change. But so we know at the same time, we get a lot of reports that the cars are going too fast on this road. Right. And so we tried every solution we could think of as a possibility to slow traffic down. There's anything left, right? I mean, I think these are the methods, right? Maybe Greg can get inventive and give us a couple more to try, but these are the standard toolbox items that could be used, and they've kind of all been shot down 2-to-1. Yet, I think the majority of the people would like the traffic to slow down on this road. So somehow, if we could ask the questions in that you can have slower traffic with one of these methods, or you can have higher traffic, but there's no question, we didn't really present it quite right, that the consequence of all of this feedback is that we have higher speeds on the road. Right. And I think I kind of heard, they cared about the children's safety and the crosswalk near the school and everything. Right. So I think somehow we have to present the problem that we're trying to solve and how important that is to them. And we presented enough, or staff presented enough solutions here that were all kind of not voted down, but, the public opinion was 2-to-1 against, that we're left with a null set. We're left with a null set that, well, okay, it's the speed has to be higher. So maybe we can design the survey in a way, maybe we bring in there's people at BYU, there are others that are good at designing surveys to make sure that it's measuring everything that we're trying to measure and we can't make anybody do anything, but when you're taking the survey, you're forced to make a trade-off, because that's what all this is. This is all a trade-off, right? And so if we could force the surveyor to make a trade-off between how much do you value reducing speed versus any one of these techniques, and then maybe they will pick one of these techniques or two of them and say, oh, I could live with those because I know they're going to drop speed. But here we just kind of got a blank rejection. And I think education might help some, but I'm kind of with Greg on this. People don't care enough until, I don't know. It's hard to get enough education out there. And anyway, so that's something to think about next time, is maybe we could design the survey in a way where what a lot of people want is on the question list, and you have to make the trade-off. Because I don't know what there is left, right? Well, there's probably something we can come up with, but you tried a lot of methods here and nobody likes any of them. So
yeah,
let me go back.
I was going to just add.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right about the way surveys are prepared, okay? In my prior example, which was with the public safety facility, the first poll says, are you for it or against it? It's going to cost X million dollars. And then the second survey later said, well, if you knew this, would you be for it or against it? And if you knew this, would you be for it or against it? There was a series of 5 or 6 questions. And by the time you get to the end of those 6, which is an educational process, it flipped from 1/3 against it to, or rather 2/3 against it to 1/3 against it.
Right.
All about education.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. One simple thing, I think it's obvious looking at your responses that you need only 3 categories.
Yeah.
Are you generally in favor? Are you generally opposed? Or do you not have a strong opinion? I think when you ask people, are you strongly against it? Are you strongly for it? That's what they're going to say, even if I don't think anyone is actually going to sell their house and move to American Fork because you put a roundabout on Timpview Drive. I really don't think that. So I think designing your questions with some education involved, but also just trying to minimize the polarization or the extreme values, I think would be valuable to you.
Yeah.
The key to the public is safety. All about safety. Kids, and it's about slowing down traffic. And if you couch it in that context, that's your motivation. You're not doing it for any other reason. You're just trying to make it safe and efficient. Last night, I don't think anybody doubted your motivation. It was just a semi-superficial reaction to inconveniences and fears for their kids with certain structures.
More on that, Rob?
Well, just quickly, just want to let you know. So, like I said, we need to download and process the data from the trailers that were just generally on the street in different locations. But we did a so the speed without the roundabout is, earlier, it's still within the school year, about 2 months ago, I think, we did, our pre-project, speed study. And the one that was closest to where the roundabout was, the median, and average speeds were 32.9, the 85th percentile speed, so meaning 15% are going at or above this, was 37.2. Again, this is signed at 25 miles an hour, so we're well above. And then through the roundabout, we showed consistent with, we've tried a couple of different sizes of roundabouts now, and they're all fairly consistent in terms of they all, no matter how we do it, we can get people to slow down to less than 25 miles an hour, which is one of, not the only, but one of the things that roundabouts are good for. So
let me make sure I understand this. So this is significant. So the posted speed limit is 25, and if these changes, we got the speed down to 25. People naturally drove 25 because that's what the 85 percentile is. It's kind of what that is, the design speed.
Yep.
So you brought it down 11 miles. So people are speeding at 37 miles an hour on this road, and it came down to the speed limit. So from a design point of view, this worked.
right.
The public didn't like it. The public didn't like it, and the surveys show that. But this just brought the speed down to the posted speed limit.
Right.
What were your results
Wow.
on Slate Canyon? Did you do the same kind of analysis?
We did. And through the traffic circles, I think we had 2 traffic circles. That's what we call them, mini roundabouts. I mean, like I said, they're more like 20 feet across diameter, the inner circle. But it was the same thing. I don't remember off the top of my head the exact numbers, but it was about the same. Is that the median was well below 25, and the 85th was around 25.
So 10 to 12% or per mile per hour slowdown.
Yeah.
That's terrific. I mean, interesting. This is anecdotal. This is not scientific, but I have some family on Slate Canyon, and have some people that Candace send me emails all the time about slow down, and she's got one of those blinking lights from speed outside of her house and whatever. And they're all for roundabouts, and I've been pushing hard with the city to get roundabouts for Slate Canyon because it's just a thoroughfare, right? And you've got cars parked everywhere, so little kids can dart out. You never see them in time. It just seems like it's a child death waiting to happen there. But I got some feedback recently, even from Candace. Roundabouts aren't that big a deal to them after all. They're just more concerned about the zoning violations and turning homes into duplexes illegally and parking everywhere. And so I just don't know what the public mood is there for that roundabout anymore, for the 2 of them, because I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah. So when we did it about 2 years ago, that one was not quite as polarized as it. Here's where I'd say it was polarized, but it was closer to 50-50. I think we still had slightly, we had more against than we had for, but it was closer to a 50-50, not quite as, lopsided as this one is.
Were the anti-reasons the same or different?
Yeah, a lot of them were the same. I can't make it through with my trailer, or, this is, we got snow plows up here. And I'll tell you, anything that we do, I am very, obviously our transportation department and our streets department, we work closely together. We coordinate all the time and all this kind of stuff. But this is in no way blowing off. But there's not any hardscape stuff from a snowplow standpoint that is like snowplowers are like, yes, please do that. and that's not they don't like bulb outs like other people. It makes it a little bit closer. They don't like speed bumps, speed humps, speed bumps, speed tables, whatever you want to call them, are something that they don't want, that we've heard. I don't know what police's reaction is, but at least in other places we've been told, no, please don't put these everywhere. Like a lot of people want. People want them on their street, but if we did one on every place where people wanted them on their street and where there is actual speeding problems, that is 100% of Provo. We're not going to put speed bumps on 100% of Provo.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. There's a thing they don't. The roundabouts, it makes it a little bit more difficult. It is on big vehicles like that. It's gonna be more difficult than it would be without them. But I can't make things that's really, really easy for a snowplow and a fire truck without going over the curb and a school bus and all these things to go through. but also is gonna slow down the 90% of your vehicles, which are single-person occupancy.
Yeah,
It's
tough
a
trade-off.
give and take on all of them.
I have a question about the speed. So is that 25 miles an hour that you got it down to for 85%, is that actually as they were going through the roundabout or as they approached it?
That is through the roundabout. That's what I'm saying. We
So
had,
that's still very fast for an area where they still could have been going 37 miles an hour on the straightaway.
they could. So what we have found, and that's where I'm saying we still need the rest of the data. So what we have found is that as they go through the traffic circles, as we, the ones that we did on 1450 and on Slate Canyon, or I would call this one big enough that I would still call it a roundabout here, that it slows them down to below the speed limit. And it's not as marked change for the entire length, but the averages do go down. I'll have to find 1450 so 1450 was a little bit different because it really, the two ends were isolated. I mean, that's a really long street, and we didn't have enough stuff to, at that point, we didn't go into the grand, we're going to try things along the entire stretch like we did here. It was just two ends. But we did speed trailers, I think 100 feet before them. So it's kind of as they approach what it would be. And it still reduced them by, I think it was 3 to 4 miles per hour. Even as you're just kind of coming up on before on.
Straightaway.
Yeah, it just makes it to where I know I got to slow down. So the more often on any of these things, if you only have one on a 1 mile stretch, it's not going to do anything for the rest of it, right? So you got to do more. You got to do more stuff than just a one particular location. Although one of the things about roundabouts is that, especially on places where if we do have a problem, there are sections where it is. 900 West is one that comes to mind. Now we haven't done a test on 900 West because it hasn't come up on since I've been here and we started doing this. Hasn't come up on our rehabilitation plan. But that is one where it's a fairly high crash rate area. We've pulled back similar to how the progression of how we've done things on Slate Canyon. One of the big things is that we have problems at the intersections because of the high speed, high volume, and people coming out on the side street, similar to Slate Canyon. And so we pulled back parking from the intersections like we did on Slate Canyon. We've done on 900 West. Even that, the people who live on the corners, I've received a lot of angry calls from doing that in multiple locations where we say, hey, we're trying to keep people from dying at your intersection or at least being seriously injured at your intersection. But it is not fun. And if I was living there, I would want to park in front of my house too. But we've got everything comes with a trade-off. But we've done that, and at some point, I think that would be a good place for us to try some things out because that one is more of a. That's kind of the very high end of our safety from a collector standpoint. Here's the other thing too that I think we may have talked about before, but at least we know internally. Here's the overall thing: is that we are trying to make things better, and especially as Utah and Provo, in particular, obviously, as Provo develops out, or as the county around us develops out, it's just going to increase traffic, and so we can't just stay at everybody. All the feedback that we have seen and our perception is that speeds are rising, volume obviously is rising as things go up, and so we can't just say what we've done all the time, the whole time that we've been here has worked. We're just going to stay the same. We're going to have to continue to adapt, but for all of the speeding is an issue, safety is an issue. Things do happen, but Utah is the last comparative study that I've seen is from 2018. There's probably some more up-to-date ones, but it's from 2018 comparing fatality rates across states, and Utah is in the best, the top 10 safest. And Provo, if I compare to, our mortality rate over the last 5 years compared to that study, we're slightly below. And so, it's hard to say because we're not doing things the exact way, but it seems to say that Provo is a safe city within a safe state. And we're trying to make it even, keep it that way as we, add more and more volume to streets that are only of a certain width, trying to say, okay, how do we continue to keep these things safe? That's what we're trying for.
Thanks, Rob. And thanks for all of the extra work on that project. It sounds like it was very educational on multiple levels.
I was educated.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so 2 agenda items left first of all, Clancy wanted to lead a discussion on the Safe Streets and Roads for All. He's not here, so I was just going to read the email he sent, Rob, if that sounds good to you. He says, there is a new federal program, Safe Streets for All, or SS4A, that provides $1 billion annually for transportation improvements specifically geared toward complete streets and similar initiatives. This program is unique in that it is not available to state DOTs, and it has more leeway in the types of projects that could be done versus other programs. I think it presents a great opportunity to apply for funding to address some of our unfunded active transportation needs or complete street enhancements. I want to encourage staff to pursue the funding, and we as a committee would be willing to help with that in whatever way might be appropriate. Any thoughts or response from you, from our city works on that?
So this grant just went live, was it Monday, or maybe Monday or Tuesday? I think it was Monday. And there was not a lot of outreach, at least that we saw. Usually when things come out like this, UDOT is the one that kind of takes the lead in making everybody aware of it. Now, maybe because it's more specific to municipalities and counties, I haven't seen any training on it. Even if you go to here, there's a link to training. The first training that I could see is the middle of June, even though it's already open the middle of May. The first training on it is middle of June, and then everything's due in September. So on the one hand, looking at it, our initial reaction is, yeah, let's apply for something. It's brand new, and so it's hard to gauge. Usually on grants we can say, okay, here's the type of projects that have worked before. So we're reading through, and it seems like a pretty broad range when it comes to safety and different types of streets. And so we'll see. We'll go to the training, try to get more. Okay, really, what are you looking for? What do you think would be successful in terms of which type of street to apply for, or which type of project to apply for? The other nice thing is this is the initial bipartisan bill is it's $1 billion a year for 5 years, and so it'll be a learning experience for this first year, and then we'll have 4 more years to apply for it after that. So just barely came open. We just barely became aware of it. Do we have a list of projects that we say, hey, this is our preset that we were anticipating to apply for this? No, we don't. But yeah, I think we'd be interested.
But you
We are
have
interested.
Well, we have a whole list
Yeah,
in
we do.
the new transportation master plan, right?
We do.
We have a whole list of active transportation. And Clancy's been wanting us for, 2 years now to sit down and prioritize that list and organize it and think through strategically of how to do that effectively, which brings us to item 5. But I think we could work on that this summer if that would be helpful. I assume you would be the ones applying for it, for the, the grant.
So this is interesting, and it's a brand new program, so the DOT may not have been aware of it, but they're explicitly excluded from it, which is very
that's
strange.
what I noticed. Yeah.
The administration is trying to bypass DOTs because of, frankly, a growing consensus that they're not helpful in improving transportation safety, especially in communities and for active transportation projects. This is something I think the city should go for, or work with the MPO to with MAG to do some sort of regional thing. But yeah, I think UDOT won't be a lot of help in this because they're not going to get any of the money.
Yeah, has MAG said anything to you, the staff there? Because this is all the cities and MAG too. Probably should coordinate, or maybe the cities apply and MAG applies too. I don't know, right? This definitely looks like a good opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we need to cooperate with them.
We have our own list.
Yeah, we could come up with our own list. Now I think it might be not that means that we shouldn't ask them anything, but I don't think that it needs to be. I think it would be something more that the city, with your input, the city is the one that would go and run with. But like I said, there really wasn't. I hadn't heard at this at all until Monday. So,
is there any expertise in MAG to respond to the grants, or does the city have the sufficient skill or access to consultants to write the grants, or does MAG have more access to that? That's where I would think a partnership would be helpful, as if they had staff that were good at writing grants, if they were any better than we were in Provo City. Do you have a comment on that?
So we have been successful in writing grants, but I would say that MAG is going to have people who are better at us. So it would be good for us to reach out to them and say, hey, what's your input on how to do this grant? So yeah, we've been
Okay,
successful
all
in
right.
getting grants, but yeah, it would be helpful to reach out to them.
Okay.
So I think this is all, go ahead, yay, we're all in favor, okay.
Go get money.
Yes, please, make Provo better. Okay, item 5, I'm gonna jump back really quickly to number 2 because I was going so quickly, I didn't officially have us vote. TMAC members, anyone against approving the minutes? Are we all in favor?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Great.
In favor.
It's unanimous. There you go. Judy, now you can finish that item. Thank you. I'm excited for Clancy to be here next month. Number 5, topics for future meetings. Rob, sorry, you're really working hard today. Discussion led by you once again.
Well, and before we get to that, understanding that we typically should and try to have everything on our agenda. We have been working with police on something that just came up within the last few weeks, and it's not we'd like your input, but it's not necessarily a voting thing, so I think it should be okay for us to talk about without having it on the agenda item first. But if you guys want to kind of go through what your program is.
Yeah, so I'm Officer Knight with the traffic enforcement team. We overseen here by Lieutenant Huntsman. And we focus on traffic safety within the city as well as traffic accident reduction. One of the things, a few months ago, I applied for an innovation grant through the city for a concept that I titled Traffic Safety and Enforcement Post. But one of the issues that we have is there's a lot of streets in Provo that we get some complaints because we'll park somewhere to enforce that maybe isn't the most appropriate or safest position for us to be in, or posted no parking. And so what we've been trying to do is bring ourselves more in line that we can provide that deterrent to speeding while also positioning ourselves and traffic in a safer environment. And what I came up with, the idea of the traffic enforcement safety post, was a painted but highly visible, say, parking space, for lack of a better term, on the roadside, on the shoulder, in some of the targeted locations are in currently posted no parking area, but establishing a known position, public knows we will be at, to try and help bring speeding down as well as reduce accidents. Some of the locations that we've identified have been like 300, between 300 and 400 west on 4800 north. Typically, when we work up there, we can get people going 25 over on a regular basis, 20 to 25 over. With 4 of us up there, pretty.
Is that right,
consistent.
coming down from the hill?
Yeah, it's both directions. So a lot of people come up with I was going downhill. It's both directions. So we also will go park on State Street about between 1720. Again, people consistently going 20 to 25 over on the uphill. Those are high accident, high risk locations. Kind of what we targeted with these enforcement posts. To further explain what I mean by that is, on Cougar Boulevard, we've got those nice bright green painted bike lanes and bike spaces. Having something similar to that, we're kind of partial to blue, so I would say like a noticeable blue color. And having marked signage there that says police parking only or enforcement post, something that can portray to the citizens that a cop's going to be there, with the or that a officer might be there. The concept being
anybody in here, if you're going down the road and you see a police officer parked on the side of the road, what's the first thing you do?
Slow down.
Slow down, push on your brakes. How fast am I going?
Push on your brakes. I'm going the speed limit, so I'm. These guys are.
He's the one. You just laugh and keep going. Okay, great.
No, I got it.
But in those high-risk, high-accident locations, having a known position that's bright, that as people continue to drive there, hopefully reduces that traffic. And where I got this idea from, it's not my idea, I didn't come up with it, I'm not that smart. But I was deployed to the Middle East, and it's something that they use there, is they have posted cement pads on the side of their highways that their law enforcement comes and they park on. The caveat is that typically they're not very proactive, so they just still flies up and down the road. But I thought it was a good idea because I go back to my childhood with my lead foot when I was in high school, and I knew every morning when I was going to wrestling practice, hey, that county deputy always is parking there. So a couple blocks away, I slow down, and then, speed back up.
Would it have the opposite effect, where if it was painted blue and you knew that that was the place they parked and you saw from a distance the blue spot was empty, that you would be... Because it tells people where to expect you instead of to not know where you might be?
Yes, it could, I guess.
But also, if you don't see it, so if you know, I like his example, if he's a couple blocks away, I've driven this and I know there's a blue spot. I gotta get in sight distance before I know I get to speed up, because I gotta at least drive slow.
Till I get there.
So, the other thing that I really liked in his presentation, he came presented to Rob and I, was, I didn't think about him too much till he talked, and you want the police to be able to have a safe access entrance into traffic. And so I'm thinking, as we start looking at some of our capital facility projects, we're building roads. This is a demonstration project, we'll do it. But I'm thinking we ought to make that a more thoughtful process of, this is a way they can get, because where they're running red lights and so forth, that is a critical safety issue. I mean, that, I can't explain enough. So if they can get into places where we know we need to have that kind of enforcement, and it's just not, okay, the police is an afterthought, find a place to get, and it's kind of dangerous to enter the traffic volume. We want to sit down with them and look at this as maybe a bigger situation than just these 5 locations. And I think from a public standpoint, it's not this typical, the police officers hiding behind the sign we are clearly educating you on this issue, and it's really like the proactiveness of it. So to me, it gave me a lot of thought. So I really like trying to get these 5 spots put in, put a police logo right in the middle of that blue paint, make it look really sharp, put signs there. This is a place we're expecting you to change your behavior.
Or are they...
So I'm not... So my question... Sorry, my question is, if there are places that have such known egregious speeding, is enforcement the best option, or do we need to have design changes as well? It seems like if there are places where everyone's driving 25, 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, that something's wrong in the design of the road. And we should be addressing that as well, potentially, and not just through enforcement.
Capital project, money is tight, so it's going to be difficult to do a lot as quickly as we want to do things. I think as long as we have roads, there's going to be opportunity to educate the public about their speed. So I agree with you that there's ways to look at things, but as we saw with the Timpview, it's going to be long processes to get those kinds of things done. And I think this is something that if it works in these 5 places, I think we ought to be going out and doing some studies just to see what the speed does, see what happens. before, after, I think this has the potential of doing something really incredible if people react to it the way I hope they do. Then I think we're on to something. So I'd really like to try this just because this is such a chronic problem in the world, not just in Provo, but I think I haven't seen this. I need to be deployed more often, but just kidding. To see what they're doing out in the world, because everybody's battling the same things we are, and they're coming up with worthwhile. And like Rob said, we just can't stay. We have to progress somehow. We have to think of new ways to address these things.
You know, at first blush, this sounds like a really good idea. Easy experiment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't cost us much of anything. And David, I think this would be an administrative matter. You wouldn't need any legislative approval or appropriation. I think you can just go ahead and do this on an experimental basis for a year and come back to us and tell us what you think.
The grant's been issued for the initial 5, which would cover the paint to paint the space and the signs.
I was gonna just add on to that. I mean, it's a good idea. Signage, I guess that's gonna help as well, especially right before that area that we're gonna fence, East Watch neighborhood, whatever, or road. And to add on to that, maybe not have one spot, but maybe every other intersection have the same logo there, just so they can maintain that speed and be aware that, okay, it's just not, they drove by it, they saw one logo, okay, there's no police, they can speed up. Maybe every other intersection or every other sections, whatever it takes, to keep them to.
Right, and having these designated locations, it provides a spot officers can go and, hey, I've got to do a quick report, I'm down the street from here, I'm just going to go park there. They might not be doing any enforcement action, but just them being there is a deterrent. Having the space there is a deterrent. Now, yeah, somebody might get close enough and realize there's not an officer currently there, but we've now already, like, but by the time they've slowed down, they've realized that an officer's not already there, we've already decrease the likelihood of an accident, because most accidents in these high-risk locations aren't paying attention. So if we can get people to pay attention, oh, I know that there's cops around here. I know that they're up there, so I'm going to be watching. They're more aware of what's going on around them on the road.
You had, like, let's say, 10-block radius, and you had 3 spots you could be at, but it could vary. I don't know where they're going to be at today, so I'm going to go 25 into the right.
Have more than one spot, yeah.
Part of their message goes beyond just the speed aspects of it as well. Think to yourself, distracted driving, people texting and driving, that type of thing, in addition to seatbelt. When they see the uniform or they see that post, they're likely to be aware, seatbelt aware, not be texting and driving aware. So it's multiple missions in that one specific one, but more so that added margin of safety for the officers encroaching intersections. A win-win both ways for us.
And to build on what Gordon said earlier, this is kind of a trial to see what we can get regard to how it affects. But there's a safety aspect for the officers right now, because there's not in these targeted locations, there's not a lot of opportunity for an officer to and enforce a traffic light that people are always running and causing accidents, because there's no spot that we can get to safely. As we move forward and as we get some statistics on it and being able to plan into road design or into current easement space, spot where an officer can pull up and be able to maneuver either north or south, east or west, whatever direction the road's going, rather than we're kind of locked into whatever direction our nose is facing is what we can action right now. risk to doing a U-turn to chase somebody in traffic, right. But the risk to pulling out, like having the left-right visibility, pulling out and making just a turn, the risk drops significantly for officers. Officers doing U-turns are nationally one of the higher causes of accidents.
So would you be backed into the curb in these spots that you painted, so that you're,
The painted spots would not, they'd be in
parallel.
current,
Okay.
in current, shoulder space.
Mhm.
In the future,
But the future would be,
That's what you're
move the
envisioning.
sidewalk around, we could do a lot of things. I think that's what I'm saying, let's look at it in the design, make it
I
safer
like
for them.
that idea.
So,
I really like, at first I was concerned if you lose that element of surprise, because I know you're gonna be there relatively frequently, will that affect your outcomes? But I really liked what you said about how, as a teenager, if you knew where that spot was, suddenly without any extra enforcement on our part, you were slowing down in advance, and that expands that safety zone. I like that. My only concern, and I'm sure you two have looked at those 5 spots in mind, but, if those are no parking zones, there's probably good reason for them to be in no parking zones, so clearly don't put them anywhere where the officers would be in danger, right? Like, be safe there.
Or blocking a bike zone.
Or
bike
blocking
lane.
it, just don't put them anywhere that would be
Most of the no
unsafe,
parking zones
right?
in the city
Yeah,
are.
there's usually a reason for it to be in no parking zone.
he's shown us, and
You've got it.
So we'll vet that out. And I think
Okay.
the takeaway from the very beginning of the meeting is we've got Joseph here, I think we want to do a really good job telling our residents what we're doing. So before this happens, we think that there's an opportunity to really give some fanfare and make sure that people aren't confused. They can hear the real value of why we're doing this. And I think it will,
Okay.
I think starting off with what you said is that people are concerned about safety and they're concerned about speed. So we say we have this program that we're going to start looking at safety and speed, and that's what it's
And
not.
here's what the professionals have taught us works.
Yeah, so
Therefore,
we need to be doing some things to push out the message that you have speed in your
And
area.
paint is in the budget, I mean, yeah, so.
So Officer Knight, have you already identified the top 5 or 6 high-impact sites you want?
yes,
Okay,
I can tell you that right now.
let's go for it.
I think this is a great plan.
tell us, I wanna hear them.
So the first, 4,800 north, about 400 west, about between 1720 north and 960 north University Ave, another high accident area. It stretches blocks there. 1860 South State Street. Not as many accidents, but bad accidents when they're there. And then 1500 West Center off the freeway. And these are going to be vetted. These are our wish list locations that we're passing on to Robert. I vet those and come back and say, hey, those might not be the best, or we can slide them this way a little bit, and back and forth on that.
And we've talked, I think 4 out of the 5 of these locations are on UDOT facilities, so we're going to bring UDOT in, because obviously we're going to fly off to do this, but UDOT's
I
pretty
had a
supportive.
couple comments on this before we run out of time. One of them is kind of important. So I'm quite familiar with this type as something that's similar to this because I interact with traffic professionals all around the world. So the thing that this is similar to is traffic speed enforcement or red light running cameras. And I think there's some things that we can learn that you can apply to this project. So one of them is that whenever they put in either a red light running or a speed enforcement camera, they put that in and the speeds come down or the red lights stop being run. And they find that they can essentially, they leave the housings, but they move the equipment. So once the public learns that there is enforcement there, they tend to continue to assume the enforcement's there. So I think this lends support for your idea of regular stations. And someone said, you can't really see until you're pretty close if there's an officer in a patrol car parked there. So I think there's some evidence around the world that you think the people would just know where they are and kind of game it and everything, but it does tend to bring the speeds down in the areas where they regularly put these. So I think that's in support of what you're doing. The only danger that I suggest you look at carefully is increasing, especially near intersections, is rear end collisions. One of the things that the red light running cameras cause, especially when they're close to the intersection, is people slam on their brakes and then it causes a rear end. So as you look at where you're going to park, try to analyze what the driver is going to do. Do you give them sufficient time that they're not going to they're going to slow down, they're not going to immediately slam on their brakes and get rear-ended? Because with the red light enforcement cameras, it reduces the number of T-bone collisions, but it increases the number of rear ends by 4 times when they put in the red light running cameras. And so I think use that information to determine where you're going to park your vehicles, where you want to paint those blue spots, because we don't want you to inadvertently increase the number of rear ends. Now, if this is speed on a straight section, no problem, right? But if you're doing it near an intersection, be careful where you position your vehicles to try to avoid those rear ends.
Thanks, David. Really great feedback.
Good feedback.
Okay. Officers, any other things you'd like to tell us or have our feedback on? Or thank you very much for presenting that to us today. I'm going to suggest that we save discussions for future meetings till our future meeting. That's all right with everyone.
I would just say,
Just email you.
you all are welcome, with
I have a few
emailing ideas.
Okay.
And we have stuff to bring to you, but it was helpful, I think, that the first time we brought TMAC over to Public Works in January, we had that.
A whole list.
And I think we've gone through all of them already, so we are responsive. When you say, this is what we want to talk about, we're responsive to you, so let us know if there's anything you want to talk about.
All right, thank you, everyone, for a great meeting. I motion we adjourn. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay.
I'm not as good at parliamentary procedures as city council. We don't have to use it as often.
You're doing fine.
I don't know.
Not to worry.
Tracks on 100 West.
Mm-hmm.
He asked why it's